I keep that in.
That's a good way to start. With Dad farting into the couch.
Wonder if
Pardon
your
me.
microphone picked that up. I might cut that out. I don't know yet.
Okay.
Here's my question for today. What's the most dangerous situation you've been in?
Shoot.
Where you looked around and you're like, uh-oh.
So I was jogging one night. I used to work for a company that refinished bronze at night. So like in hotels and big office buildings, they have the escalators and the elevators.
Mm-hmm.
They're made of stainless steel or like that bronze, that gold color stuff. And I would go in at night and refinish that stuff because you couldn't do it during the day when people were walking around. And that meant stripping it down and sanding it out.
Do a lot of those places still have bronze? I feel like, okay.
Yeah, there's not a lot of it here in Boise, but if you go to some other cities, you'll see entire elevators made of bronze. Yeah,
Okay.
Not that unusual. But what it meant, though, is I would finish work sometimes at 2, 3, 4 a.m. I'd go in at 6 and finish at 2 a.m. sometimes. And I had this habit of, and I was probably at the time maybe 20 or 21. And
How do you get a job like that, refinishing bronze? You just... Because, at that time, you don't just, apply on LinkedIn and then you get a call or anything like that.
You know what?
How do you get hooked up with the bronze guys?
I don't remember how I got that job. I don't remember how I got it. But they needed just manual laborers,
Sure.
And if you were a young guy and physical, it was kind of what you needed to be because it was a lot of heavy hard work. But one night after we finished, I lived in a garage apartment kind of in a tough part of town. And I got home and, sometimes when you're doing a lot of physical stuff, you can't just go right to sleep. And so I got home and it was probably 2 a.m. And I thought there was a 7-Eleven probably a mile away. And I thought I would this is back in, I'd say, late 80s or maybe mid 80s. Yeah, mid 80s. And I had a Walkman that I could click on my hip that had a cassette in there. And I put on some Prince.
Okay.
Right? And it had the cord going up to my ears. And I had on a pair of shorts and tennis shoes, and that's it.
Okay.
Just no shirt, no socks, shorts and tennis shoes. And I had my Walkman on my hip, and I took off jogging to go to 7-Eleven. It was probably, like I said, a mile away. And so, but it wasn't a great neighborhood. But usually by 2 a.m., things have settled.
Yeah.
People were, even bad people are heading back at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
The bars are closed,
Yeah.
And so I'm running, and I had my head down, and I'm just listening to the music, just jamming some Prince. And as I'm running, I run up, and I open, kind of look ahead, and there's a guy laying there in a pool of blood with a bullet hole in his head. And I didn't recognize all this initially. All I saw was the blood. And I just hopped. I just kind of took a skip and skipped over the top of it and kind of hurdled the guy.
Avoided him, yeah.
And then I turn around and I see a guy laying there with a bullet hole in his head in a pool of blood. And the first thing that crossed my mind was, whoever shot him, if he sees me and I see him, because it looked fresh,
Yeah.
he's going to kill me.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to see whoever perpetrated this.
I don't want to see this. I don't
Yeah.
want to see who did this. So I dropped my head and I just took off running. I was jogging. Now I'm sprinting, like scared sprinting.
With your head down.
With my head down.
Yeah.
All I wanted to see was the next step, And I flew over and I was almost there. I was probably a block away. And so I run into the 7-Eleven. I'm frantic, And I was going over, I always went over and got me a Dr. Pepper and the cupcakes, the little chocolate cupcakes with the white.
Yeah, the hostess swirl. Yeah, the
That's
cupcakes.
And so I run in.
And it came in a glass bottle back then. That was before they started doing it.
Yeah. You get them in glass bottles. And I run in and I say, dude, there's a dead guy over on Tyler Street, which Tyler Street was the street he was on. And this is in Oak Cliff, if anybody knows this. It was near Jefferson and Tyler in Oak Cliff. And so the guy says, you can't use my phone. I'm like, just call the police. Tell them there's a dead guy over there, And he's like, you can't use the phone. Go use the payphone out front. And this was back when they had payphones.
Sure.
So I go out there and drop a quarter in, and this is before 911. So I type in 744-4444. That's the emergency number.
Hold on. This might be new to me.
Yeah.
There was a time before 911.
Before 911. Yeah.
We're talking mid-'80s.
Yeah, and you had to put a quarter in to call 744-4444.
Was that just on payphones?
It was, no, anywhere. You had to dial. You had to dial.
Why do I feel like I've seen movies from the 70s though, where they're like, call 911?
Well, it wasn't that way in Dallas. I remembered vividly. You remember these kind of
I'm
things
sure
when
you
you're in
do,
these
yeah,
situations,
yeah.
you know, heightened situations. And so, so I call up and I say, give me the police department,
Yeah.
right? So they connect me to the police department, and I say, hey, there's a guy over in 12th Street near Jefferson that's laying in a pool of blood. He's been shot. Get somebody over here. And they say, well, you don't need the police. You need the fire
Paramedics.
department.
Yeah.
Well, he said fire department,
Okay.
and he hung up on me. I know.
And you're like, I got to spend another
I
quarter
had
on
to
this
drop
crap.
another quarter in there. And then I said, give me the fire department. And I didn't make the connection, but yeah, they meant the paramedics, but they said fire department.
Sure.
And I remember saying, he's not on fire, he's dead.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I remember saying that, and
Yeah.
they hung up on me. And I'm like, what the crap? So I ended up calling, and that's when I made the connection. But I waited. I went in the 7-Eleven and got my Dr. Pepper and my cupcakes, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I could still eat.
With what quarters you had left at
yeah,
that
well,
point.
I could still eat. Yeah. By the way, I used to stick little dollar bills down in my shoe,
Okay.
right? Because I didn't have any pockets.
Sure.
And I'm jogging. And so, you know, I get my cupcakes and Dr. Pepper.
How much do you think a cupcake and a Dr. Pepper was at that
maybe
point?
$1.50.
Each?
No,
Or together?
total. Yeah.
Dadgum.
Probably 75 cents a piece or so. It
Dang.
wasn't a lot. Yeah.
Because nowadays a cupcake and a bottle of Coke will run you
yeah.
$5.50
Yeah,
probably.
it's up there. Yeah.
Sheesh.
And so I'm waiting in the 7-Eleven with the dude. I ain't going back outside until I see the cops roll.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'm just chatting.
Yeah,
with
for
the
all
dude.
you know, it's a sniper and he's up in the...
Who knows, man? Yeah, I didn't want to test it.
Could you imagine that?
Yeah. A sniper, yeah.
Yeah, a sniper. Yeah.
Just picking people
Just
off.
Call
you
of
know?
Duty. Yeah.
And so, so finally, I hear the ambulances and all. And you know, you can kind of peek and you see all the flashing lights
Yeah.
on the other
By the
side.
way, I'm just curious. This doesn't have anything to do with the story. I'm
Okay.
just visualizing it. Was the body a white guy, a black guy,
Mexican
Hispanic
guy.
guy, a Mexican guy?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay.
And so, I see the cops. I don't know who's there, but I see a lot of lights, and I realize it's probably safe to go over there now. So I start walking back by, and the street was probably 2 lanes this way, 2 lanes this way, with a median, you know, a little curb median about this big. And so I'm just walking across the other side, just eating my cupcake, drinking my Dr. Pepper, kind of looking, just kind of watching to see if the body's still there, or they have it covered, or what's the deal. And one of the guys says, hey. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, come over here.
One of the police officers.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, they want to talk to me because I called it in, you know.
Yeah.
So there's no cars at this time of night. So I just walk across the street and he says, let me see your shoe. And I looked down at the blood and there's a footprint leaving, the heel of a footprint leaving. And I looked down and I had stepped in the edge of the blood. And I'm thinking, oh no.
Yikes.
And he looks at me and he looks at my shoe and you could see the blood on my shoe.
Yeah.
And he's like, come over here. And I'm like, no, hold on.
Yeah, I called it in.
I called it in. The guy
Yeah.
over at the 7-Eleven will tell you. And so he detained me for a minute. He didn't put cuffs on me, but he detained me for a minute. The problem was, though, I didn't have any ID on me. I mean, I'm just out jogging.
You barely had $1 in your sock.
Yeah. And he, for some reason,
Old
he
sock
believed
dollar.
me. Yeah, sock dollar. A moist dollar.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's down in my shoe.
Yeah, there's sock dollar and rock lobster. Basically the same thing.
That's right. They're the same.
Yeah.
And so he ended up driving me. He ended up putting me in his car, you know, and they had already taken the body away. They got it away. They got it out of there pretty quick, and they cleaned it up pretty quick. But he drove me back to my apartment where I gave him my driver's license. He showed him everything. And
Okay.
So he let me go, and I never heard anything else about it. But that was one moment I was super scared. Another moment.
What was more scary to you? I think I probably know the answer. Was that the killer might still be around, or
That
I'm
was
going
it.
to jail for this?
No, the killer around was
Okay.
scarier. Yeah. The idea that somebody could shoot me because I saw something scared the crap out of me. Yeah. But another time I was super scared, and I might have been even more scared this time because I saw guys getting shot. Just down the hill from Oak Cliff, across I-35. I think it's I-35. No, it might be I-30. I can't remember. But anyway, you go down this hill, and it's West Dallas, an area where they have a lot of projects, rows of projects. And they used to have a Mexican league down there, soccer.
Okay.
And I had played goalkeeper in high school. And so one of the guys that I played with said, hey, come down and play in our Mexican league. And I said, I'm not Mexican. He said, just don't talk. You know, my hair was a little longer.
Just don't talk.
Yeah. He said my hair was
Like that was gonna fool anybody, man.
I was tan.
You were tanned
And
up.
my hair was a
Okay.
little longer, and he said they'll just think you're Brazilian or some crap.
Whatever, man.
I know, how silly. How silly. Here's the funnier thing: Gary played.
Brazilians are darker than Mexicans are.
Whatever,
Man.
whatever. I knew how to say Petros, which
Yeah.
meant back.
Petros.
Yeah,
Okay.
back.
Yeah.
Petros. Pass it back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's all I really said.
Anything south of Dallas was Mexico anyway, right?
It sure seemed like it. Yeah.
You don't know no better.
But yeah, so anyway, we're playing in this Latin league, and we're playing these Jamaicans. We're playing a team of Jamaicans, and I'm back in the goal.
They were Brazilians also, basically.
They were probably
weren't they? Just
Brazilians,
kidding.
But anyway, the way it worked out here is they had these big giant fields. I mean, and they would have like 3 football fields lined up, and they really didn't have much grass because they were right by the projects, and kids were out there playing all day long.
It was dirt clods.
It was just a big, almost cement dirt field.
Sure.
Right? And I'm back in the goal, and you could pull your cars, like if you played on the field next to the road is probably 20, 30 yards away. You could just pull off the road right up to the edge of the field. Mm-hmm. And, maybe 10 feet off the edge of the field, and it kind of created, and people would just, and so there's cars lined up, and people are watching, and a couple of cars pull up. We start the game, and it's probably 10 minutes in, and we're just, just fun game. They're playing, and 3 or 4 cars pull up, and a bunch of dudes get out with automatic weapons, like pistols and, I don't know, AR or whatever. I don't know a whole lot about guns, And they just start
hosing.
They start looking. Like they run out on the field, they're looking for somebody. And they found the guy. And as soon as they run out on the field, I mean, everybody scatters, right? And but they're not letting some guys scatter on the Jamaican team. They're kind of
Corralling them a little
guys.
bit. Yikes.
And they found the dude they want, and they just start popping bullets into him. And there's a couple guys that were, I think, trying to defend him or something, and they shot them too, right? Well, everybody else runs and scatters. And I remember, I'm away from it. It's on the other side of the field, so I'm about as far away as you can get on the field. And when I see them hop out with guns, I mean, I take off running. And I run over, and there's a van parked up next to the field, like a Good Times van, And I basically slid underneath the front of it. I mean, I took off running and slid like I'm sliding into second base.
Yeah.
And then I flip over, and I'm just watching, And they start shooting, and they killed a couple guys. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 or however many. But I'm like so scared I can't move. Right? And then they take off, and they're screaming and yelling and crying and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just laying there into this car, and I'm like, I was afraid to get out. I didn't know what to do. And so I'm just laying there thinking, eventually I gotta, and I'd ridden over there with one of my buddies. So I'm in a Monte Carlo. Oh, it's always a Monte Carlo. And with a no kidding, a steering wheel that was made out of a chain. One of the Mexican dudes on my team. I want to say his name's Carlos, but I couldn't be for sure. But anyway, so I'm laying into that van, and I'm thinking, did he take off? Because, guys will leave your butt in those situations.
Yeah.
But I'm too afraid to get out from under the van. And I didn't know it, but apparently there were some guys in the van.
Okay.
Watching the game. And they saw me slide under, and they were apparently ready to go. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm laying under this van, and all of a sudden they honked the horn to get me out from under the van. And I smashed my head on the bottom, on the bumper, And I climb out, and they're like, "Dave, we want to go, man. What are you doing? You're under our car. We can't drive,
Yeah.
And I'm like freaking out. But I remember I didn't want to head towards that way because the ambulance hadn't come. There's a couple of dead bodies over there.
Sure.
But you don't really know when guns start going off. You don't know where the crossfire is. You don't know really what's happening. And so that was the other time I wasn't. I think I was more afraid when I saw the dead body with the bullet hole because I knew if I saw somebody, I was dead. In this case, I felt like there was a little bit of a buffer, but it changes you.
Yeah.
It changes the way you see the world when you see somebody.
Yeah, you
lose their life.
weren't the target, and you could get out of the way so you wouldn't become the target in that second story.
In that second story.
Yeah.
But it also changes the way you view things when you see somebody lose their life in front of you.
Yeah.
Especially in that kind of way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's probably the scaredest I've ever been. But when I was a kid, I had a situation where my dad told me, "Quit being scared. You need to stand up and you're more likely, where I grew up, you're more likely to get hurt if you walk around in fear, because they can it's almost
Sure,
like
sure.
a stench.
Yeah.
But if you stand up tall, even if you're not a big dude,
Yeah.
if you just
Well,
don't
it's
look
like
like a victim,
bullies seek out the people who are the most vulnerable, right?
yeah.
And same thing with criminals. Criminals are people who want to commit, violence. They don't want to do it to the person who.
might fight back.
Yeah. They want
even
to
if
do.
you're not a big dude.
Yeah, they want to do it to the person that.
And if you're
can
a
get away with
small
it.
dude and you're walking around in a bad neighborhood looking like you're not scared,
Yeah.
they think you might be packing heat too.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
Look at that crazy white boy walking around.
Yeah,
He
he's
ain't
too
scared.
confident. He's got
That
a
dude's
piece.
got something on him. And
Yeah.
I never did.
Yeah.
I had been told if you carry a weapon, you're going to get shot eventually. So I never did anything and I didn't have access to it anyway.
Sure.
But yeah, so I've always been one of these guys who, even when I shouldn't have been, even to this day, I think I walk around with confidence, unwarranted confidence
Yeah.
in certain situations that I probably should. And I know you do it too. You've picked that up.
A little bit.
Yeah, because you'll do things I've seen you do things in basketball games that escalate things, and I'm like, what the crap is he doing? He's going to get. There's 5 guys that want to whoop him, and you're talking trash, and I'm like, holy crap! And it's because you're just unafraid, right? Mm-hmm. You're just unafraid.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the reasons I never.
Those
got
instances are few and far between. I'm not a
not like
goat
that all the time?
Not usually.
You just do it when I'm around. So
I don't.
can see you do
I
it.
don't. I think you got lucky. I think.
You got lucky.
I'm not a.
And you know what?
not typically
You also
that way.
calm down very quickly. Like you'll
I can
chirp.
go up and down real quick.
You'll chirp at people, and then in the next moment, you're over there saying, "Hey, sorry about that."
I'm right
lost my
back to it.
temper."
Yeah.
Which is a good thing to be able to do, because then guys know you're not a patsy, but they also
Yeah.
know you're friendly and you're not looking for that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So how about you? What were you the scariest?
I don't know if there's been an instance where I've been like real scared, but there has been instances where I'm like, this could be dangerous.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I didn't feel like the fear in me.
Yeah.
And they all happened to me basically when I was in Argentina, right?
Right.
I mentioned in one of our last episodes, I think, that I lived over there for a couple years, slinging Jesus,
Oh yeah.
And
Slinging Jesus. Jesus is looking down, going, "I like that." Slinging
You think
Jesus.
so?
Oh yeah. I think he's like, "Give me some."
yeah. Oh yeah.
Come on now.
That's funny.
You hope, right?
I hope so. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm smoked. I'm gonna get smoked for it.
Yeah. Take a step to the right.
yeah.
Right.
But that's when those kinds of danger. One time whenever you're a missionary, whenever you're doing that, you're always with they call your companion, right? You're partnered up and you do all your work together. So there was a time when we were walking around at night, heading back to our apartment, and a dude rolled up on a bicycle and he pulled out a gun and started waving it at us and said, empty your pockets, give me your bags, this kind of thing, right?
Right.
And at that time, I was with a little Colombian guy, and he got real scared real quickly.
Yeah.
And he threw his bag off and everything. And I was trying to walk away like he wasn't talking to me. And then he put the gun right at me and said, "Give me your bag right now." And
Do you remember what kind of gun it was? Was it like a little 22?
It was like a little. It was it looked like a revolver.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like shiny, if I remember correctly, right?
Right.
And who knows? It could have been a daggum Halloween gun, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. It could have been a costume gun. But anyway, he was waving it at us, so I took off my bag, and it was more like, I felt more humiliated. I was like, dang it, I was like, my bus pass was in there, Like later on, I was like, I gotta go buy a new bus pass and
Right.
fill
And you
it
don't
up
have
with
a lot
credits.
of money out there.
No. Yeah, they don't. We're not
You're
living
scraping
lavishly.
by.
Yeah. So I was like, dadgum, and I had like 40 pesos on that bus pass.
So you
I
were
gotta
never.
go.
It didn't.
It didn't make me feel,
Did he point the gun at you?
Yeah.
See, that's creepy. Did you not feel that?
Maybe it's because I was slinging Jesus. I felt like, hey, if I get capped right now, I'm going straight to heaven.
I remember telling you that, by the way. If you die on your mission, you go straight to heaven. Your
Yeah.
ticket is punched.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I said, my companion was scared enough for the both of us, and I was trying to walk away. And that's when he got over to me. He's like, "You too."
Gotcha.
And at that, I was like, he doesn't have any reason to. I don't know. I didn't feel the fear in me, right?
Right.
And there was times I saw a guy snort cocaine right in front of me one time.
Right.
There was a time in one of the areas that I was in. It's called
They had cocaine in the suburbs of Argentina?
I wasn't in the suburbs.
Oh, what were you in?
I was in
In the country?
Yeah, well, so Buenos Aires is a province that's shaped like this, right?
Okay.
And so when they say Buenos Aires, they usually think of the city that's on the western side.
Okay.
And then, but if you go out into the province, that's where you get into some of the more ghetto areas, and then
Gotcha.
farthest out you get into the countryside.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
So sometimes I was in the countryside, sometimes I was in kind of those surrounding.
The favelas.
If you, that's the best thing that you can kind of.
Yeah.
And that wasn't every single area. There was one area specifically where I was in a place that had. It wasn't the favelas that were like stacked up the hills like you see in the movies.
Right.
But it was like, narrow concrete passageways that had houses that would go out into there. And so there was times where I saw dudes, in the they're called Visha, right?
Okay.
So in the Visha, which is like government housing, right? Those narrow concrete areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, snorting cocaine, or there was a street drug called Paco that came in. It came in like a.
You know too much about this.
Well, you just see it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you would walk and you would look and you would see the wrappers all over the place, and you're like, oh, someone around here is doing Paco, right?
Which came wrapped.
It came wrapped in
candy?
like you know what it looked like? It looked like 5 gum. You know how 5 gum comes
yeah.
in that like different colored tinfoil wrapper?
Sure.
It looked like that, and it was in all different colors. So if you were walking down, you would see a bunch, red, green, blue, yellow, orange. If
Gotcha.
you saw those wrappers, you're like, someone around here's been doing Paco, right? Which is it was like the bottom of the barrel of whatever cocaine or crack they were cooking up, right?
Gotcha.
But it would mess dudes up, you know.
And they wouldn't be right at that point.
Yeah, and
But see, that's kind of frightening too when guys aren't right,
Yeah,
because their inhibitions are gone. And they're liable to do something that's
yeah,
crazy at that point.
yeah. And granted, like I said, I was never having a conversation with anybody that was actively on it.
Yeah.
Right. I would see it happening and then walk away.
Right.
Right. And there was times when you would turn the corner in the Visha and a dude would go like this and look over at you, and he was putting his gun back in his bag and stuff like. So that happened a couple times. I think the time though that I would feel a little bit scared, it would cross over into feeling the fear, is when drunk guys would confront us.
Gotcha.
Right? You'd have this big, homely drunk dude run up on you and be like, "Los Americanos," right? Like, oh, I'm gonna talk to the Americans. He's like, "What are you doing here? You got some money? Like, what's going on?" Right?
Yeah.
And I would always tell him, no, I'm from Misiones, right? Misiones is another province in Argentina.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And I heard that's where the Nazis escaped to.
Oh. You're the big blonde.
I'm the big blonde guy, right?
Yeah.
So that I would say sometimes when they would run up on me, I had heard. I don't know if that's
so
true.
one time that being a Nazi would be reasonably safe for you.
Yeah, like no, I'm an Argentinian just like you.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
from Misiones, right? I had heard that. Who knows? It's probably not true whatsoever.
Right.
But I'd heard it, and I was like, maybe I can commit. This dude's drunk. He's not in his right mind. So I'm like, no. Yo soy misionero. Like I'm.
Yeah.
Soy de
And you
Misiones,
spoke
right?
the language enough.
I spoke it well.
Pretty clean.
I tried really hard to speak it really well too.
Yeah.
And granted, it never got perfect,
You're
right?
never as good as you probably think you are.
I'm definitely not as good now either.
Oh, of course.
But when I was there in the thick of it,
You
right?
had it?
I had it. I was doing really well.
Yeah.
Right. But there were still some things that hung me up, right?
I got
But
you.
I would tell them, I'm like, no, I'm Argentinian too, dude, just like you. I'm just from Misiones.
Right.
And they would look at me like,
Yeah.
they're like, and every now and then one of them would go, "Good to meet you, brother." right? They would hit me with that, right?
Yeah.
And every now and then they're like, "I'm not so sure about that,
Right.
but I can't really decide. So on your way, fellas, right?" But yeah, there was one time actually, I pulled that trick on a dude, and the drunk guy, he had a big old hammer in his hand.
Oh.
And he was running up on us, and I had a brand new missionary, also an American, a USA kid.
Yeah.
And he was a littler guy, and he was kind of like back. You could tell the fear was in him, and I was just trying. I was like, let me use my Misiones trick and see if I can do it, and that one worked out. But
I'm from Misiones.
yeah. We are not the white dudes you're looking for, right? But he was running up on us with a hammer, and I was like, yee.
That's a scary thing right there,
Yeah.
man. That's scary. Well, it's interesting you say that because you and I had that deal with Mom when you were on your mission.
Yeah.
Because your mom was afraid of, you'd send back pictures and it would frighten her because it looked like you were in areas where there was trouble.
I was, Argentina is on its way up, and I mean, they're going through a lot of economic stuff the way that the rest of the world is. So if I had been in the city of Buenos Aires, it would have been a lot more tolerable for mom, but I was out in the
right
sticks, right? And it, when you look at the pictures of it, you're like, that's a third world country, you know, according to what we know as.
And we had this, you and I had this game that went like this. Anything bad that happened to you, you told me.
Yeah.
And anything good, you told your mom.
Yeah, so she didn't know about the drunk
She
folks.
had no idea about
She
that
didn't know
until
about
you got
the
back.
Yeah, she didn't know about the gun robbery or anything like that.
Right.
Yep.
You did send her a picture though when you hit your head on that.
That's true. That's you may not be able to see it, but I have a scar down the side of my face, and that's when a dude pistol whipped me. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's the story I try to tell people. No, in Argentina, they don't have a pound system, or at least in the places that I was at, they don't have.
For dogs.
Yeah, they don't have the dog catcher, right?
Right.
So dogs go around having puppies with other dogs, and they just run rampant, and they, they're
mangy all over.
They're mangy, they're pooping, and they're getting into people's garbage, right?
Okay.
So what they do is, instead of rounding up the dogs, they build these little baskets that go outside their house, and they throw their garbage into these baskets that are elevated and raised up, right? And then the garbage man will come pull it off of there and throw it in, right?
Gotcha. Well, they're not. You're taller than your average Argentinian.
Yeah, they're about chest height.
Oh, okay. So they're not too high.
They're about chest height, but typically they're just little baskets on these sticks.
Okay.
Right? So like kind of like a big bowl basket, and the pole goes down to the ground. Right? Now, one night we were walking, it was dark, we were trying to get back to our apartment, and we were walking, and I was one of the kind of like when you stepped in that dude.
Yeah.
I was walking with my head down, just trying to get home as quick as I could, and all of a sudden, hey, from my guy, and boom, I just clip into, and I look up, and it wasn't just a basket, it was someone had taken a platform of metal like that thick and just nailed it to a telephone pole, and that's what they were putting their garbage up on top of, and I just ran hard into it.
Side of your head.
Yep, and it immediately my face just started bleeding open.
And that's when you took a picture and sent it to us.
I did take a picture of that because they zipped me over to the hospital and stitched me up.
But you also told us you were okay.
I was good. Yeah, I was good.
Now, did you go to what kind of doctor did you go to?
So that's a funny story too, because at first I was like, I've never busted my face open, but I know how the Jessels handle this. I'm gonna go to the pharmacy, grab some butterfly bandages, and I'll fix it myself, right?
Little vitamin D in there.
Yep,
Make sure
I can handle this, right?
Tape it shut.
So
little super glue maybe.
Yeah, and so they also run it this way. There's typically 4 or 5 pharmacies in town, right?
Okay.
But they take turns being open.
Okay.
Right? So they're all open from, the end of the siesta until 5 or 6 in the evening.
Right.
And then they all close down except for one in town, and they take turns being open through the evening.
Gotcha.
Right? So the pharmacy right next to us was closed. The next pharmacy was closed.
And you're walking.
We're walking, right?
And you just pressing against it to keep it from bleeding.
I have like Band-Aids and stuff stuck up there,
right, to try to keep it from bleeding.
And we finally get to the pharmacy that's open. I'm like, hey, do you have a butterfly bandage? Right? And they're like, what is that? And I'm like, the bandage that has it cinches in the middle.
Right.
It
pull it tight.
Yeah, it bends, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't have anything like that. And I'm like, uh-oh. So that's when I call the offices of our mission. I'm like, hey, this happened to me. What do you think I should do? And they call me back. They're like, hey, we're sending a taxi. We're going to send you to the hospital and get you stitched up, right? And some of the other people, they were like, don't go to the hospital here in town.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why not? They're like, you'll walk in with a cold and walk out pregnant. They're like, that's that, that's that free health care over there. You better be careful about that, Yeah, that's what they told me. They're like, you're walking with a headache and you walk out pregnant.
Yeah.
But they took me into Buenos Aires, took me to a nice one. They got me stitched up, right? Mm-hmm. I remember, funny story, the lady who was getting me set up before they stitched me up, she was this...
Did they deaden it and stuff? Or they
they deadened it and stuff like that too. But it was...
you don't know, right? And
the lady who was checking me out, right? She was kind of a pretty lady.
Uh-oh.
Right?
Yeah.
And she was sitting there and she was checking me out. She's like, are you experiencing any memory loss? Right? And I said, if you can tell me that I didn't run into a garbage can, then I'll accept whatever you're telling me. I'll accept that memory loss.
Right.
And she looked at me like, I don't think that's very funny.
You're making jokes.
I'm making jokes, right? I'm like, Yeah, no memory loss, but if you can tell me it was something different, I'll believe it right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Because a better story
Yeah.
than telling people you ran into a
Well,
trash can.
yeah, for the next month, people are like, what happened to your face? And I was like,
Right.
choqué con un canasto de basura. And they're like, oh my gosh, El, come on, man.
The worst way ever.
Yeah, the absolute lamest way. You could bust your
Golly.
face wide open.
You know that.
So I told people for years I got pistol whipped. That's what I told my wife when I first met her, and she was
Yeah.
like, "No, you didn't.
you
Shut
didn't.
up."
She knew right away,
She knew,
didn't she?
yeah. She was one of the only people to ever ask me. I went on dates and stuff like that, and I could see them staring at me like, "What happened
Yeah.
to that dude's face?"
Right.
And then first date, Carrie was like, "What happened to your face?" She had no fear about asking me,
Right.
so
Yeah.
that was a check in the.
You know, I had
The column.
I had a situation one time where, so I have a little scar under the eye from boxing, and once you open up somewhere, when you box, it becomes a target because if they can get you to
Yeah,
bleed,
yeah.
then they'll
You can
stop.
get a TKO or whatever,
They'll stop
yeah.
amateur fights pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was dating this girl. Her name was Patricia Summers. She lived in Plano, Texas, and she was this beautiful, tall, blonde girl, right? And I told her I'm going to box Saturday, and she said, "Can you make it out to my house Saturday night? We're going to do something. I want to introduce you to my father, you know."
Yeah.
And I said, "That's fine, you know." I mean, we weren't that close, but
Yeah.
I'm a pretty reasonably nice guy. I didn't have any problems meeting anybody. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Well, in that match, the dude beat me up. He whooped me good, and he opened me up big time. And so I had butterfly bandages. I had some super glue caked on there, but it still looked. And my eye was black. I was a mess.
Yeah.
And after the fight, I had my head felt fuzzy, because you know even when you box, even when you win, it hurts.
Yeah.
Like you don't get punched and not
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah.
But I lost, and I was hurting. And so I called her and I said, "I'm not so sure, you know." And she said, "Well, we're going out to this really nice steakhouse, and my dad's going to pay." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm there."
Oh, I'm there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking this is going to be great, steak and baked
Yeah.
potato, you know.
Yeah.
So
After getting my clock
know.
cleaned, my clock clunged.
yeah, so I can get some protein back in me. I'll
Yep,
feel
yep,
better, you
yep.
know. So I hopped in my 1962 Carmen Ghia,
Yeah, not a Monte Carlo this
primer
time.
white.
Primer white. That's so white trash. That's so trash.
I was going to paint it
You
eventually.
couldn't afford the paint, so it was
No,
only
it's
the primer
white,
color.
yeah.
My goodness, how many primer white cars rolled around your neighborhood?
Well, they were usually primer, that rose primer color.
Yeah, the kind of like
Yeah, but I
it's
knew
almost
it-
purpley, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, but I was
Okay.
going to paint mine white. So I primed it white with white primer so that it would, out of a spray can, you know, not anything fancy. Yeah, it was white trash.
Yeah.
And I drive out to Plano, which at the time was rich. She had money. Her family had money. And so I roll up in front of their house. I hop out, and her dad comes walking out. He's like 6'5", and he's a giant man.
Okay.
And he says, "Hop in our." They had a Lincoln Continental, big 4-door Lincoln Continental. And I remember hopping in the back.
Those things were long and wide, weren't
Big
they?
cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a luxury deal.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
you
It
just-
was a luxury
You're
car.
sitting out there with
And
your
when he
legs
got
like
in, he
this.
sat down. That whole front seat just shook, you know.
He was a big boy.
A big dude. And his wife was this beautiful, like she was a trophy wife, definitely. And it made sense because it was her mom, right?
Sure.
And she was beautiful too. And so we drive over there, and as we're driving over there, I'm just feeling sicker and sicker.
Yeah.
And by the time we get to this nice, like I never went to these nice restaurants. So I'm sitting there, and I remember it was like an hour. And I remember the whole time I'm trying not to throw up, because my head was throbbing. I was just so uncomfortable. I had one, those migraines that make you feel like.
Yeah.
And I remember just.
Do you think you
in
swallow
misery.
blood at all when that happens too?
Well, I don't think so, because it was in my
On your
eye.
face, okay.
It wasn't in my mouth at
Okay.
all. Usually your mouth stays pretty clean because they put pretty big mouth guards on you, and you're wearing the headgear and everything.
Because it's an amateur fight.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
At
But
what point do they take that off of you? Is it an
When you
age
go
thing
pro,
or is it?
no, I think
Okay.
When you go pro, they take them.
Sure.
I
Okay.
guess I never fought a pro
Yeah.
fight, but yeah. And so I remember sitting there, and Patricia kept looking at me, and she's like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just playing it off. You're not talking much." I said, "I'm a little."
You're like, when's the ribeye getting here?
Well, I remember not eating a lot
Oh,
because I was afraid I was going to throw up.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to embarrass her or him or.
Yeah.
I'm in a nice restaurant. I even had to wear like a button-up
coat,
shirt.
yeah.
She told me to dress a little nicer. But yeah, it was It was the one. It was the one time where I was just looking horrible, you know. And I remember going for the rest of that week. I was just everybody who saw me was like, "What the heck happened to you?"
Yeah,
I'm
you're like, I got opened
boxed.
up. Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, you got beat." They knew.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, I got beat. So that was the situation where I remember everybody asking me. It was just humiliating.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
That's how I felt after I got robbed, and I told everybody.
Yeah.
They're like, "What happened?" I was like,
Yeah, you shouldn't feel
Yeah.
humiliated.
"Yeah."
But it feels that way.
It feels,
doesn't it?
yeah. Well, the dude was. Did I tell you the dude was on a bicycle?
He robbed you on a bicycle? He rode up on you?
He rode up and he said, "Get over here," right? And then he rode off, you know. And I was like, "Dadgummit, we got robbed by the freaking BMX Express, man, or whatever, the BMX Bandit." Yeah, get over here, right?
You're thinking if I was fast enough, I could have run. He might not have been able to catch me on a bike.
It was a dirt road too, so he'd have been, hitting the potholes and
Yeah.
everything. But
you
yeah,
know, you can't run from a bullet, so it's probably
sure,
better to just
yeah,
give your
yeah,
stuff up.
yeah. The BMX Bandit strikes again.
Was it a BMX bike?
I don't remember. It was.
It would
wa-
be if it was like a girl's bike, it would be even worse. If you
Yeah,
rode
with the
up on you.
with the band
And a basket.
the ribbons coming off the side. Yeah.
The handlebars in a basket.
He's got his gun
He's
attached
like,
to the
"Ching,
ribbons.
Hey,
Yeah, yeah.
give me your money.
Yeah.
He rolls up on you, gives you the
My
bell, and
goodness.
tells you to give you
My
his
goodness.
money, huh?
Well, cool. I think that's probably a good place to stop for us
Sounds
tonight.
good, man. It's great chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. See you guys next week.
Bye.